We blame Theresa May for many things. And I think it's safe to say that Theresa the Appeaser, Theresa the Traitor, is the worst Prime Minister that I can remember. We found out this weekend, not only is she betraying the British people and British democracy by deliberately destroying Brexit and by deliberately trying to frustrate it. Now we learn that she is blackmailing the DUP and saying, if you don't vote for my deal, you may have a united Ireland. They won't crumble to that. They won't crumble to her phony bullying tactics. Theresa May has always been a traitor. We go back through her history. We found out this very weekend. She's betrayed the troops. She signed a memo saying that the troops, the soldiers that came to Northern Ireland to protect the people of Northern Ireland from terrorists, should be treated the same as terrorists. When she was Home Secretary, she presided over a policy of appeasement, appeasing terrorists, appeasing Islamist terrorists, appeasing IRA terrorists. She surrendered to the European Union without a shot being fired. Theresa May is the worst Prime Minister in history, but she's not the only bad Prime Minister we've had. Let's go back, let's dial it back. David Cameron took us into a war with Libya that destabilised the Middle East and led to a migrant crisis. In fact, I should say it further destabilised the Middle East because we've got a track record with Prime Ministers launching unnecessary wars in the Middle East. Before him, Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown, the man who single-handedly bankrupted Britain. The man who sold our gold reserves when they were at their cheapest. The worst possible business deal in history was thrust upon the British people by Gordon Brown. And then we go to Tony Blair, and many people call out Tony Blair for his folly in the Middle East, for him backing the attack on Iraq. As bad as that was, and it was bad, his lies to the people of Northern Ireland were far worse. Tony Blair promised the people of Northern Ireland, that not one terrorist would be released from prison until full decommissioning had taken place. Within 2 years of the Good Friday Agreement being signed and us voting on it and agreeing to it, every terrorist was out of prison. Not a gun, not a bomb, not a bullet had been handed over. Ian Paisley was the one that got us decommissioning, and it took 10 years. And what was also buried in that agreement was a betrayal of British soldiers, which Theresa May has continued, which David Cameron continued. This dreadful appeasement of IRA terrorists. And of course, Tony Blair also oversaw the mass import of immigrants to the United Kingdom in the early 2000s. People coming in, 250, 300,000 people a year coming into the United Kingdom. And then we go back before him and we get to John Major. And we found out that it was John Major that took us into the European Union. It was John Major that started having secret talks with Irish Republican terrorists. And then we go back again and we get to Margaret Thatcher. And we find that Maggie was literally in it up to her neck, running round Saudi Arabia with a headscarf on, doing dodgy deals. Yes, people made money out of them. Yes, British Aerospace sold loads of fighter planes and we sold loads of tanks and goodness knows what else to the Saudis. But what a trade-off. We sold them weapons and they sold us weaponized jihadis. Thanks very much, Margaret. So right the way through my teenage years, up until my 50s, every single Prime Minister in this country that I can remember, that I know about, has betrayed this country. Theresa May's the worst of them, which is saying something. But we need a clean sweep in British politics, where these scoundrels are put out for good, where the civil service is completely reformed, and new political parties and new politicians walk into the Houses of Parliament and give that odious little man, John Bercow, the shock of his life. It's time for change. It's time for a clean sweep, and it's time to drain the swamp. And in my mind, it's time to support UKIP and change politics in this country forever.